All right.
All right.
All right. You guys ready? Dr. Lisle? Okay. Welcome, everybody. It's Dr. Lisle. We have a special treat today. We see Dr. Doug Lisle. He's a psychologist, right?
Yeah, that's right. Good to see you.
Good to see
Good
you.
to be back. All right, folks. Welcome to Chef AJ's people. I'm sure a bunch of folks that will be watching. All right. What we're doing today is just a very simple deal. We're just doing question and answer. So we're here at Fasting Escape, and we've got some prisoners here.
Escapees.
Good, they're going to go home soon. The questions about anything. If you got questions, great. If not, I'll just start talking about something.
It might take me a second to think.
Yeah, give you a second.
Yeah.
Some types of things I talk about are self-esteem processes. You know how you're going to do things when you get home. Some sort of strategies maybe for dealing with other people if there's other people that are problematic or there may be obstacles in the way there. Anything in there that comes to mind?
Yeah, if you can, just speak to like how do you handle like friends and relatives that don't understand, the plant-based,
Right.
diet.
Right. Yes. The main thing that I do is to try to reel in our own nature, and our own nature is that when we come up with something really valuable, some valuable ideas, we want to share them with the village. That's what we want to do. That's probably one of the most fundamental things that makes us human is an antsiness to tell people what we've learned. It's what I call the teaching gene. And so one of the more amazing aspects that you'll ever see that indicates this is if you ever hang out with a 4-year-old and they'll just ask you why. They'll just like why. One day my good friend Dr. Alan Goldhammer actually made it a point to answer every one of his kids' why questions, because usually he'd blow them off after 3 or 4 questions, like, okay, I'm busy. And so one day as an experiment, he just kept answering, and it went for over 2 hours.
Wow.
It was like, he only did that because he was curious, what would it take to satiate that mind? And he just kept at it, and it just continued on. It was like, well over a couple hundred questions. So that tells us that's what's inside that mind is essentially a questioning mechanism that wants to know. And it feels when you get an answer, there's a relief. It's like it's a satisfaction feeling, like, oh, now I know. That's how in the mysteries on television, if they can get you into the little murder mystery or medical mystery or legal mystery, whatever it is, it's like now you're curious about how it's going to turn out, and you don't feel satisfied until you understand how it all turns out. That's just human nature. It's a really curious part about human curiosity. And so it doesn't do any good to have such a curious mechanism that wants to learn if there isn't somebody willing to tell you. So the other side of it, essentially a parental mechanism, is, well, let me show you, let me explain. And so that's why so many people actually want to grow up to be teachers, is that it feels fundamentally really satisfying to share information. It just does. And so we have that, there's esteem processes that sit under this, that drive it, and that is that if you can share somebody and show somebody something new and explain it to them, and it's valuable to them, they value you more. So we want to be the person that shows you how to do something. And in sports, there's a phrase, well, I taught him everything he knows. And I mean, that's what the veteran wants to show the rookie, so that later on it's like, yeah, I showed him how to do that. And that's a good feeling that you feel like you've earned that sort of bragging rights and esteem with that individual if you show them something. So that's our teaching gene. And it's big. It's no small event inside the human nervous system to share information and show and explain. The problem is that certain things make sense to show and explain and certain things don't. So if we're going to explain to our kid, don't go around the big rock by the river, there's a big snake that lives in the river right over there. It's like, and that kid will be like, okay, that's really important. And so it's really worth both the parent and child having that interaction where everybody's taking it really seriously. When we find out something is important as the connection between diet and health, we've experienced it, then we're really convinced. It's one thing to read it and then hear about it and learn from people that say that it's a big deal. And then it's another thing to actually have it happen to you. So when you get substantially better as a result of a change of dietary lifestyle habits, you of course would want to share this with your village. It makes complete sense. You're antsy to do it. And in principle, the people on the other side ought to be highly receptive. But this is where it goes foul. And that is, they're not highly receptive. And the reason they're not highly receptive is that the information that you're bringing them is not the same thing as telling them, listen, don't swim over there, or swim over there. It's safer, okay? And it's not telling them, hey, these two funny looking stones, if you rub these things together, they're gonna help you make fire, okay? That's, once they see how that works, they're gonna be so excited at how much energy they're gonna save from this. It's gonna be, fabulous. And then you get a bunch of credit. Like, did you hear what Fung did? Fung found these two stones, and look at this. And we no longer have to, try to find a fire from a wildfire or something. The problem is that we're actually explaining to people that they have to go against their most cherished instincts. That what it is that their instincts are telling them is the right thing to do, that which is the most pleasurable, the most enjoyable with respect to their food, that we're telling them that that's actually counterproductive. That's what they need to get rid of. And it really seems like a bunch of sanctimonious preaching that's what it feels like. And it feels like we're putting ourselves above them on a hierarchy of intelligence and conscientiousness. And that with the sanctimonious preaching, we're telling them this thing. They can't and are unlikely to see it as us bringing information to them that's valuable. They just probably won't. And so I don't even bother. I did this a lot in my 20s. Like all it takes, I'm just sitting waiting for anybody to say about anything, anybody that they know that has a health problem. Well, my aunt's she's having a problem. They tell you, okay? That's what I did. And what I got was a bunch of uncomfortable, uninterested people. That's what it was, including in my own family. So actually, when I think about it, I think my dad would preach to other people about how they should do what I say, but he himself wasn't going to do it. Okay? Yes.
So, kind of interesting question on this. So, what if you have people who are supportive, your
Yes.
family or friends, but they don't want to do it themselves?
Sure.
But whenever you break a little bit, they're gonna tell you that you're not supposed to eat something, or won't even let you eat the things that
Oh, that is too funny. That's an upside down situation. That's great. What can you do? You can tell them, hey, look, I'm only batting for an A. I'm not batting for an A plus. But the problem is that they're going to feel like that we're sort of looking down on them, and that's a problem. So I actually try to avoid this. And I try to never set up a situation where I'm doing that. When I have done this in the past, and I have certainly done it many times, the problem is it almost always sets up a permanent uncomfortable situation, and it's never quite the same. And I'm sort of backpedaling socially after that, sort of minimizing what it is that I said, because there's no way that I don't know of anybody that I ever met actually. In my family and friends that took this and ran with it. Isn't that amazing? Mm-hmm. It's actually extraordinary when I really think about it. Like 35 years later, like who did I ever say, hey, this is a really important and good idea, and that person took off and ran with it? Nobody. Mm-hmm. Okay. My dad finally, after a quintuple bypass surgery that almost killed him, finally listened. Okay, so Then he had a pretty good life after that for many years as a result of cleaning his act up. So, but that was a rare situation. That was somebody who had been rolling his eyeballs and gleefully, eating Texas brisket in front of me for 25 years. So first he did that, then he damn near died. Then the geniuses didn't save him. He barely survived their intervention that was supposed to be no problem. And then he was terrified. Okay, so Nathan's mentor, Alan Goldhammer, said, hey, there's a couple things. Debilitating pain and terror of imminent death. I mean, those are the two motivating factors that usually cause change. And that was the motivating factor for my dad. Okay, that's what it was. And I can't recall anybody else. I had a good childhood friend that took this information and ran with it, sort of a more agreeable, open kind of a character. And he did that for many years, and then he wandered away just because that same openness, just was sort of like, oh well, he did that for a while. It was sort of an adventure in his young life, and then he sort of went away from it. It's kind of interesting. I think those of us that have absorbed this lesson and have lived it, we suffer from a tremendous egocentric bias. And that is because it seems so obvious to us, it seems so intelligent. And of course we understand that it can be a struggle, because all of us will struggle with the allure of the pleasure trap. So we know that it's not easy, but at the same time, we know that it seems tremendously worthwhile. And so as a result of that, it's a little bizarre to imagine that everybody isn't setting their course in a very similar direction. That of course you would want to protect your health well, and of course you would be willing to go to a certain amount of sacrifice, and of course you would want to know what to do. And then when you find out that it's not the tastiest, most exciting thing to do, that's okay. You just do a pretty good job. You would at least be motivated to move this direction. And it's astonishing to find out that people aren't. Okay, that's what's amazing to us. And yes, go ahead.
When you look at it like you're one person,
yes,
and there's like people I know, they trust the doctors.
Sure.
And the meds are easier.
Sure.
And I'm just one person by myself. I didn't go to med school.
Sure.
Yeah. That
Guess
seems
what?
to be just shut it down right there.
Wouldn't help anyway.
Yeah.
You could be a full professor at Harvard Medical School, talking to your friends
That's
and family.
what Dr. Gershfeld said. Because
Yeah.
I said if I was a better example, maybe it would make a difference. And he said, no, not really.
I think one of the most important things to understand about this is that this is a unusual life choice. This is simply not a life choice that most people, under any reasonable conditions, that they will ever consider. And that's just how it is. So anybody that has ever really thought this through and done enough research into this to wind up at a place like Fasting Escape, or the McDougall program or True North, if you have made that kind of a study of this for whatever reason, and you've actually made steps to try to actualize the potential of what this information can bring you, that is a rare set of circumstances that causes that person to do that. And who knows what all the factors are. So in your case, you had a lot of joint pain, pretty serious business, and you were doing a good job, but as good a job as you were doing, it still wasn't doing it all. So then you go one step more wacky.
Right.
A water fast. Okay? That's one even John McDougall scratches his head on that one. Well, I'm not sure. But it turns out we know.
And to me it was do or die. People thought it was a choice. To me it wasn't a choice. I didn't want to go back on methotrexate.
Yes.
I didn't want to go on a chemo med, even though they tried to tell me it's such a small dose.
Yes, such a small dose.
You're making a big deal out of nothing. It's
Sure.
small. It's
yes. Yeah. And how long did that take to get out of pain?
I was here 2 days.
2 days. 2 days on water?
Yes.
2 days on water out of pain. I've heard that 30 times in my career.
I will say I did start Dr. McDougall. I had a couple months ahead cleaning up my diet, and I think that helped it.
Oh, there's no question.
be faster.
Oh, we
but-
can give Dr. McDougall lots of credit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's no
And
question.
Dr. Goldhammer.
Yes, we'll give him less.
Yeah.
He gets too much.
He kept slowly taking stuff away from me.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And that's good. And so it's fantastic. And once you've experienced a revolutionary change in your own existence, it's not only that you know and that you would share with other people, but there's tremendous relief to know that you've got control.
Yes.
I mean, there's nothing like that. So even when people, we've got people at True North, and Nathan's only been here for a year now. He's done this for many years at True North, but he saw this, that people would keep coming back, okay? And one of the reasons is that pleasure trap's difficult, but they know, hey, I can recover, so it's a beautiful thing to be knowledgeable, to know that you have the ability, the capacity to heal is sitting right inside your own body, which is fantastic. And all we have to do is access it with the right things. But if you don't know that, how do you talk that into somebody in a credible way? I mean, we can give examples, we can show even scientific work that we do, but until people experience it, they will never have that feeling of confidence and motivation that there's really a solution to their problems. And as a result, a lot of times they're not interested in listening to us. So yeah, a lot easier. And let's face it, the guys in the white coats, men and women in the white coats with fancy degrees believe so wholeheartely in what it is that they think is true. And so they think the solution is metformin, or whatever it is, whatever their drug du jour is that they're giving. And they really believe it, and they're just simply not exposed to a whole different paradigm shift. And when they are, I have to say, it's really gratifying to watch them. When we have physicians come to True North, and they walk around after a week or two with their mouths open, like, wow, I would not have known that was possible. And it's cool for us to watch them. It's kind of strange for a doctor to look at a patient and not be doing something to the patient, okay, and then come back 24 hours later, and obviously things haven't radically changed. They seem to have hardly changed at all, okay? So we didn't give them a drug to drive their cholesterol down. We didn't give them a drug to drive their blood pressure down. We just calmly waited for it to unwind on its own. And then we come back another day, and then we come back another day, and then 7 or 10 days later, the problem's gone. And it's like, how on earth did that happen? You didn't do anything. It is so counter to medical. So if it's hard for a medical doctor to imagine how this would possibly work, you can imagine that the lay public and our family and friends just isn't going to be there. So what do? Nothing. That's how I handle it. So my attitude is summed up in lectures I've given. I call it the Esteem strategy. Anybody asks me what it is that I'm doing, I just say, well, I'm just doing this dietary thing. I'm running a little experiment. We'll see how it goes. Who knows? Guys, some interesting ideas. Not sure the guys are telling me this or right about everything. And doctor says it seems to make some sense. As long as I can do it, as long as it seems to be working for me. Not sure it's right for everybody. Just shucking and jiving the whole way, not educating anybody about anything. And now we'll just see. Having an attitude of, running an experiment, I'm just going to see how it goes. The beauty of running an experiment and giving that concept to people is that it is an incredible position of power in argument. Because if they say it's wrong, it's going to fail, and you're going to get sick, you say, you're probably right. But I'm going to do it anyway. Okay? So now you're on unbelievably solid ground. There's literally no punch that they can knock you over with. It's like, probably won't work. Let's just see what happens. Okay? They say it'll work, but I'm not necessarily expecting it to work. But I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to give it an honest effort and see what happens in the next 90 days. oh, you'd be dead in 90 days. Well, if it gets bad enough between now and then, I'll change something about it. Okay, but I'm just going to see. Okay, now, the thing is that by not making us right and them wrong, we don't have a fight over it. Now they get a worried curiosity that you could be right. But as the next 90 days comes and you're better, it's like, hey, what do you know? Now we're not gloating, and we were never in a situation where we were either going to be right and they were going to be wrong, or vice versa. We take the air out of that tire, and so we take the pressure away, and we make it like, hey, could be right, not sure that this is going to work, seems to be working for me, not sure it's going to continue, going to just give it a little experiment, see what happens. That's actually how I would handle people. Does that make sense? Yeah, it does not suffice the teaching gene. The teaching gene wants to tell them, okay? That's the instinct we try to keep under wraps if we can. And instead have a sense of, hey, we can go as far as, hey, I think there's something to it. I think it might work. I'm not sure. But I'm gonna try this and we'll just see what happens. But that keeps you out of a I'm right, you're wrong dynamic, which can be really problematic. Then you're sort of fighting with people in your head and you don't have an inner peace about what it is that you're doing. Okay? Yes, okay. Other things.
So we know the importance of like good nourishment for your body and taking care of you in that aspect for health. And I've just been thinking about like, we talk about people, or maybe it happened in our own lives where we're kind of just eating to be numb. In a sense, I feel like there's things like mentally, so we talked about like how mental health and stress can kind of affect your overall health, right, in your body. And so I'm just like trying to think, I don't know, like just your ideas or your thoughts on, you were talking about like satiating the mind, like what things kind of fulfill that aspect.
Yeah, I would say there's a few things. This all comes under general principle that I would call balance. That it's pretty easy for people's lives to get out of balance in the modern environment. It's actually quite simple for that to happen, and it's almost inevitable that it will happen unless we are conscious of it and know that we're trying to be adjusting our lives back into balance by having some simple rules that we try to follow pretty religiously. There's a couple of major sources of psychological emotional distress. There are a few, but there's a couple of them that are major and that are fairly habitual. And one of them is sleep deprivation. So it's very easy for people to get sleep deprived. And the reason, I'm thinking about yawning just talking about that. The reason for that is electric lights. And so it's an interaction really between two things. The electric lights keep the day, they make the day a lot longer than it would have been naturally. And secondly, also, our lives don't involve the hard physical labor that they're actually designed for. So I can remember once when I was a young man, I worked in construction. They had me lifting heavy things, as you can. Actually, they did. I worked in construction as for a plasterer, and so for some strange reason, the convention in the construction trades for plastering is that the sacks of concrete and other materials like that are 90 pounds. So for me, that's really heavy. And so I was lifting 90-pound sacks of concrete on my shoulder and then taking them over into in a cement mixer and then mixing the cement and lifting the cement mixer and putting into the wheelbarrow and then taking the wheelbarrow that was unbelievably heavy with now wet cement and then hauling it over to the plasters all day long. Well, let me tell you, you're not staying up at night. When you get home from a 10-hour day working as a plasterer, there is absolutely no way you're up at 9 o'clock. at night. That is impossible. So the hard physical labor had me sleeping, 11 or 12 hours a night. That's what I did. Around the world, people will sleep usually a solid 7 hours is typical for people, oftentimes more. But in these days, it's easy for people someone that might really need 8 to be clipping it, okay? And on the other end of that clipping, what we're gonna find is something that will take care of the sort of sensation of being fatigued, and that's going to be caffeine. So the electric lights and low sedentary work makes possible for you to stay up later because you're not actually physically fatigued. So very few people are physically fatigued today. I mean, some people are, believe me. If you're a waitress or a busboy or if you're working in the construction trades, I mean, there are people that are physically fatigued at the end of the day, but most people are not physically fatigued at the end of the day. They're psychologically fatigued. But that psychological fatigue, you can stand. It doesn't pull you to go to sleep. It pulls you to get your mind, essentially de-stress. So you watch a little TV, just hang out, goof around, and then when you finally go to sleep, very oftentimes you've chopped the day up and now you're short of sleep. When you wake up the next day, your mind is not fully recovered. And as a result of that, there's a particular chemical, adenosine or whatever it's called, adenosine, that is a chemical signaling agent that tells your mind that it's not fully clean. Sleep cleans your brain. That's what it is. It's just it's a process of filtering out a lot of debris from the previous day. And when it doesn't become fully cleaned, you have a feeling, and the feeling is sleepiness. So sleepiness is the feeling that is caused by that chemical, which will be in a sufficient concentration for you to feel it, and that chemical is a signaling marker that tells you your brain's not clean, okay? Caffeine blocks that signal. That's how it works. That's literally the physical mechanism of how caffeine works. So as a result, a person that is in fact tired, and in fact is tired because the brain is dirty, it's polluted, that person needs to shut their eyes and sleep and would want to, but when they drink coffee, they're fully awake. They feel completely not interested in sleeping at all because effectively the chemical that causes that feeling has been artificially blocked. Now, when you do that day after day, week after week, month after month, in fact, that's kind of how it is that you live. That you're just living on 1 or 2 cups of coffee a day in order to block that signal. What you're looking at is chronic mental fatigue. And that mental fatigue, this is now you talk about psycho-emotional nourishment in life. This is a big problem. So now the person is actually fatigued. All of their emotional dynamics are being blunted. They're actually going to be more likely to be irritable. They don't have as much feeling of joy in their existence. This is not the same. It's not the same state of the brain as when an animal is completely sleep satiated and it wakes up in the morning, having worked physically fairly hard the day before, but having entirely recovered. Okay. When that happens, you'll find that an animal is what we call bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. That's how they feel, okay? They are raring to go. That's how it feels. And you'll see that in third graders on the playground, running around and chasing each other around. They're, a lot of times they've slept enough. And as a result of that, they are rocking. That's how they feel. So that's one place where life can get out of balance, and it's a very simple one, to observe. And if that's part of your existence, that's one price. Another price is that that because of that, there's a sort of an exacerbation cycle of causality that will spin from this, and that is that people, because they're fatigued and their nervous systems are telling them that really the most valuable thing that they could do is to sleep. It may not be practical to sleep, they may be stimulated enough that they're not going to sleep, but their nervous system is basically saying, the most valuable thing that we could do is sleep. What they're not going to do now is they're not going to exercise. Okay, they're not going to do it. Their nervous systems are saying, no, this is not a valuable thing for us to be doing. And so as a result, they don't. So now we wind up with a couple of major problems sort of piggybacking on each other, where the people are not sleep satiated, and then they never actually do physical actions that are fairly vigorous. The value of those physical actions to be vigorous, there's several, but one of them is it really helps work out a lot of nervous tension. When you work most people work in conditions that are somewhat psychologically stressful. I can't imagine some of the work that people do. I can't imagine being a customer service rep. I never do this. The way I've treated customer service reps, and I'm like a fairly decent human, but when I'm irritated, I can't believe what they must put up with all day long. And so there's a lot of jobs where you're under a lot of pressure one way or the other to perform. There's time pressures that are putting you under the gun, and it's either other people's emotions or general time pressure demands. These things are stressful, but they're stressful in a way that isn't typical of human nature. So human nature stressors were usually not psychologically that intense. Usually they were physical. So usually it's about how we've got to make sure we dig up enough potatoes and get them for dinner. And we got to be watching our kids and make sure that they don't get eaten by the lions. So these are the kind of stressors that people were under. They weren't under sort of the chronic, low-grade, minor little pressures that go on in a workday on a brain that's kind of fatigued and a little bit drugged up, and therefore a nervous system that when we're done, the last thing it wants to do is to go do anything physical. Another story from my friend Alan, about 15 years ago, he decided to run another experiment. He's good at running these little experiments. And he has a fairly large amount of land, and there's a man that comes and works on that land. You could call him a gardener, but he does sort of more than that. There's like orchards and there's all kinds of stuff that this guy does. And one day, Alan decided, for some reason, that he was going to go out and work with him all day. He had all of his patients. He took that day off his schedule, and he just sort of, out of his own curiosity, he wanted to see what would happen. And Alan Goldhammer is quite a good athlete. He's actually very strong and athletic, and he's in really good physical condition. So he went out there expecting it wouldn't be a problem. And he said, it was insane. The guy just totally worked him under the table. Mm-hmm. The guy was in much better condition to be doing sort of this fairly heavy labor all day long. And Alan kept up. He says at the end of the day, he was totally exhausted physically. But he said to me, the difference was he was not exhausted emotionally. Okay? As a doctor, when he would come home, he'd always be a little irritable with his wife and son, just a little bit. And it wasn't because they did anything wrong. It's just that he'd been putting up with people and all these demands and all this pressure all day long. And when he came home, like he didn't have a lot of bandwidth left, and i.e. a life out of balance. Okay, like a customer service person coming home, the life is out of balance. When he went out there and worked the land for the day, the life was not out of balance. He said there was no psychological stress. There was a task to do, something that needed to be done, and you had to go do it. And there was the nervous tension inside the system said, we want things to be different, and I'm going to have to go use my muscles to make it different. And then he would go and do that action, and then through that process, you have the little nervous tension of, hey, I want life to be better, and then you go actually take large muscular actions to make life better, and then life is better as you did something that has improved your circumstances. This is the natural order of events for humanity. Okay? That's what it would be. a little bit of nervous tension, things aren't quite what we want, go take the physical muscular action to make it so. Now you've made it so, now you feel better. Now we're on to the next project, okay? That's how human beings were designed, okay? Now we do this. That's what we do. It's like, wow, we've got so smart to have machines do incredible things for us that the muscular movements are very little, and many of us, like myself, the only movement we make is with our mouth. That's it, okay? It's the only work we do. And yet, if you're on the phone all day with people, and if you're in conflict with people, I can't imagine being an attorney as well. You better like to argue, and that is that being in that kind of nervous tension all day long, you never take any physical actions to actually get rid of the adrenalized process that is built up, that is natural for you to dissipate through large muscular movements, okay? It's a life out of balance. And so, and when people are then sleep deprived, what do they not do? They don't go do the daily exercise that would help dissipate that stress and put them back into a nice, lower adrenalized gestalt at the end of their day so that they can go to bed easily on time and relax and get a full night's sleep and then do it all over again, okay? So this is lives out of balance. The other little things that you'll find is a third major problem of how lives get out of balance is that very often people try to put too much in their day. So this is particularly true of people that are pleasant, okay? Pleasant people, nice people, wind up saying yes too often to too many people. And there's a reason why this takes place. The modern environment is built differently than the Stone Age environment in many ways, but one particular way is fairly dramatic for nice people. And that is that you no longer have a leadership hierarchy of where where everybody can see each other. So in a Stone Age village, there's 50 people in the village, and everybody knows everybody, and everybody knows everybody else's skills and abilities. And so when the workday begins, there can be some recruitment of, hey, you, and you go with Billy, and you guys are going to be doing that today. It's like, it's not a problem. So this is, it's clear what everybody's going to be doing to do their contributions. But in the modern environment, you have a woman who has a job and a household and kids and a PTA and a church and a sister-in-law, and none of these people can see each other. Okay? So the boss can't see that she also has a husband and kids, and the boss can't see that she's got a pastor, and the pastor can't see that she's got a job and that she's on the PTA and that she's got in-laws that need help. It's like nobody can see each other. So the village is fractured, okay? And because those people in the village can't have line of sight on each other, then what can happen is that a person who is not naturally assertive, okay, i.e. a nice person who's pleasant and agreeable and responsible can wind up very easily upsetting other people when they're getting committed. They say, gee, I'd really like to help, but I have to do this. Wait a second. I need your help with this. Okay. And what happens now, they become overcommitted and overscheduled. And if they have some things on their list that would be extremely important for their own balance, like, for example, doing their diet well, exercising and getting to sleep on time, those things get sacrificed immediately, okay? Because of their personalities, they wind up pushing their own goals to the side and making sure they're taking care of these sort of more powerful, assertive people in their various hierarchies that they're in, who are demanding more of them, okay? That wouldn't have happened in the Stone Age. In the Stone Age, it's like, no, I can't help you because I'm going with Sue and we're digging potatoes. Oh, got it. Sue's in charge of that. Then we're not going to argue about your time and what you're going to do. But if you don't have that situation, you can see how easily it is for people to then go agree to one more thing, because they don't want to disappoint another individual. They can't cancel something else out that's in their list. But what they can cancel out is the one thing where they don't have any conflicts of interest with other people, which is their own personal goals. Those can get sacrificed without them having to negotiate with anybody else. And that's what I see happen. So now we take the camera back and we try to answer the question of emotional nourishment, and we start out with the principle of balance, okay? And what do I see? I see people that are staying up too late, sometimes because they're kind of wired and full of a little adrenaline that didn't get dissipated, and then they wake up the next morning without enough sleep, and they block that with caffeine, and they get through their day, and then they feel physically fatigued towards the end of the day, and kind of like they've had enough, and they have no joy or bounce in order to go do a minimum amount of exercise that would only be a facsimile of the amount of exercise we would have done in the Stone Age. Okay? Recent evidence of Stone Age hunter-gatherers indicate that Stone Age men are running 16 miles a day on hunts. Nobody runs 16 miles a day. Professional athletes aren't running 16 miles a day. These guys are professional athletes. What is a professional athlete other than a guy with a spear getting up at 5 in the morning and tracking a wild game and running 16 miles that day? That is a professional athlete. Okay? That guy at the end of the day is dissipated all the nervous energy that he's got, and he's ready to, after he eats, he's ready to light a fire, tell a few stories, catch up with the local gossip, and go to sleep. Okay? And that's what, something that we only want to have something that remotely looks like this. We want to be able to be feeling good enough, physically enough, that we do some moderately vigorous exercise. It doesn't mean that you have to run 16 miles. You have to do something that pushes your body reasonably, not super hard, but hard enough. Hard enough that you feel like, oh man, that was plenty. I'm all worked out. I'm comfortably tired. That's all I need to do. That's where people need to get to on essentially pretty much a daily basis. But in order to do that, what do we have to do? We have to stand up to all the people that are going to push us to try to sacrifice our time for them. Okay, so it turns out that being an important component of healthy living is to try to figure out how to say no to people and things that will encroach on your life and your time. And so I talk about that in a video on my website called Success Forces, and it's actually about how to keep these pushy people at bay so that we've got time to do the things that we really need to do, invest in our diet and our health, invest in our exercise process, invest in getting to sleep on time, and by doing this, have a life that's in much better balance. And this is where the physical and the psychological and emotional come together. Does that make some sense? Yeah, very good. Okay. All right, maybe time for one more question. God knows sometimes my answers go a long time. All right. Yeah, I'll leave you with one other part of the emotional component is when you go home, and that is that it's useful to know that whenever you wobble a little bit, you've got an internal audience that's watching you. And it will be a little bit disgusted with you when you wobble. It will give you some negative feedback. But we shouldn't be intimidated by that. We should consider that internal audience to be our friend. And when it gives us negative feedback, it's because we deserved it. Okay? And that doesn't mean we should throw up our hands and be intimidated by that fact. What we want to do is we want to observe how that internal audience actually functions. It's not a monster. It's actually seen as a pest by a great deal of modern psychology. So conventional modern psychology wants us to talk back to this internal critic, to try to discount what it seems to be saying, etc. What I want people to do is I instead want them to understand how this works, because it's not a critic, it's an audience. This is how it was designed. If you're thinking about, some gal's thinking about going out on a date, her internal audience is looking at how she looks in her outfit, and it's trying to give her feedback that is useful. So if it feels like she looks good in that outfit, she will feel pride. If she feels like she doesn't look that good in that outfit, then it's going to give her negative feedback. It's designed to actually be helpful. It's certainly not designed to be uniformly positive. No critic is useful then. It's an internal audience that it will give you positive feedback when it's been earned and negative feedback when it's been earned. And so when you wobble, you can expect to have some self-disgust. That's nothing to be intimidated about. It's just interesting to watch it, that's what happens. And to feel it, which you can't help. It's like, yeah, there it is. I feel kind of disgusted with myself, all right? Just as important, and unfortunately, people have a tendency to think that feeling, that once you have that feeling that you're somehow, it's almost like you've got a mental emotional cancer, that it harkens back to your childhood, that harkens back to past hurts and disappointments, and it's in fact an indictment of your potential for your future. This is not true at all. It's not even remotely the case, but it's widely propagated as how psychology works, and it's a mistake. Psychology also does not work by affirmation. Saying positive things to yourself over and over again will not impress the internal audience at all. It couldn't care less. All the internal audience cares about is what is it that you do. That's all it cares about. Okay? Show me the money. That's what it wants to see. So if you do even 5 to 7 days very, very well in a row, even after you've messed up, your internal audience will start to shift. Okay? It will notice that you've actually made, several good days of decisions in a row, and it will start to fire off pride. It can't help itself. It's an automatic mechanism. Essentially, it's a moral feedback system that says, hey, you're doing a pretty good job. That's what it'll say. And when you slip, it'll say, what was that? That was kind of mediocre. And then when you do well again, it'll say, that's pretty good. But it won't just give it to you for one move, because one move it knows isn't good enough, and that's not impressive. But if you stretch together 3 or 4 days in a row, 5 days in a row, so you've got like 15, 16, 17, 18 major eating decisions in a row, and going to bed on time, and going to the gym 2 or 3 times, or exercising in whatever convenient way that you can, if you start putting 4 or 5 good days in a row to support your health, your internal audience cannot help but notice this, and it will start to shift its internal feedback toward you in a very positive way. Okay? This is what I call esteem dynamics. That your self-esteem mechanism is actually far more dynamic than people understand. We don't have to go back and go through a history of excavating past hurts and disappointments or failures. We don't need to do that. That's not how it's designed. Okay? Your body, you don't wake up. If you had, a sprained ankle when you were 14, that ankle's healed. It's ready to go. Okay? Sometimes there can be little weaknesses if there's a bad enough injury. You know what I mean? The body may have to patch its way around something, which is also true of your mind. If you had big enough traumatic events and big enough disappointments in the past, you get something close that looks like that, it can create some anxiety. That's true. But it doesn't dominate you any more than there's people walking around that had gunshot wounds in wars or other times, and they're fine because they healed. Okay, and the same thing is true of your mental, emotional well-being, that it can heal itself fairly quickly. It's quite dynamic, and it can actually cause you to feel quite good about yourself in a matter of days. Okay, does that make some sense? So that's one of the more important things we want to pay attention to, that the major key to your better future is what it is that you do today in the next few days. And that will hopefully shift, can shift you quickly into a feeling of feeling very good about yourself, long ahead of any achievements. Okay, long before any great achievements ever take place, long before somebody loses 50 or 80 pounds, they lost 4 pounds because they did things very well for several days in a row, and they started feeling good about themselves. And that's what we want, is to set in motion very positive, positive cycles of reinforcement, where we're sleeping well, eating well, exercising well, pushing back other people when we need to push back against them, to clear out a space for our own balance. Sound good? Okay. All right. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.
All right, you bet. Good luck with all.
Thank you.
All right, you guys want some dessert?
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Yeah, let's
Perfect.
have dessert.